let me welcome our strategic collaboration panel, and they're all indeed most welcome, and we thank you on behalf of the HealthTech Ireland for joining us. On the far end, we have a remarkable guy. He's called Gary Boyle. He is a patient advocate like no other. He himself got a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease and is really passionate about his requirements and about the need for, in all of this debate, to include patient advocates. And he's also, I learned today, on this famous Martin group of the digital leadership thing that has more initials than I could shake a stick at. He is the vice chairman of that digital leadership group. And then it's a great pleasure. He's flown in all the way from Frankfurt in Germany. Miguel Coelho is the business development director for Oracle Health. And of course, like we referred to AWS, they are a global giant. And Miguel, I think, can give us a very good perspective on Ireland versus Europe and internationally of how whether we're a laggard or whether we're a leader or whether we're somewhere in between. And I think also Oracle Health can help your business in liaising with opportunities. Then I'm delighted to welcome the Chief Information Officer of the HSE, Fran Thompson. Absolutely all of the work today, unless the HSE is on the same page, it will come to nothing. And we very much appreciate you being here, Fran. And I know there are imminent developments in relation to this whole area that you're going to outline to us what the state of progress is. And last but not least, we're going to James's Hospital. Miriam Roach is the Director of Informatics and the CIO in James's Hospital. And she's going to tell us of particular initiatives that they've done in what's called a health corridor in terms of liaising, like we heard from Enterprise Ireland, of bringing SMEs and different businesses, both in the catchment area and nationally, and actually utilising their services in the hospital setting with administrators and clinicians. Okay, so the hot topic is strategic collaboration. Let's start with you, Fran, the Paymaster General, I suppose, in ways.
If only.
So tell us, you've heard the debate earlier today, and you've heard, I think there are shared objectives of getting the best technology right through the system to the patient. Where are we at in the HSE?
So if I bring you back 1 second, okay, and just from the previous panel, and we looked at what the achievements were during the pandemic. So when we started in the pandemic, we had 6 weeks notice, I suppose, in some ways, to say, right, how are we going to develop just not one system, but an ecosystem of systems that will all talk to each other, that are paperless, okay, and that will ultimately, at the end of the day, manage the vaccination program, manage the test and trace program, interface and interact with all the GPs, all the primary care practices, right the way across the whole system. And that was done on the cloud, right? And was very, very successful. It has, just as a by the way, 97.8% of people who came through that have an IHI record. Okay, so we know we can do this. And what made that successful was a couple of things. Earlier, what Tim spoke around was having a single vision, one way of doing things. We're doing this, and this is how it's going to work. The second thing was that everybody was in line with that vision. And the third thing, which is really, really important in the HSE, it's a three-party stool. We have, a four-party stool, shall I say. We have our collaboration vendors. Internally, we have a clinical lead, we have management lead, and we have ICT at the table. When those four people come together, it works. Now, going forward, we are trying to take what we've done in that area and say, right, how do we make that now work for everybody? And the first thing is putting the patient at the center. That's the starting point. So we're not looking at individual solutions. It's an end-to-end journey with the patient at the center. And that's absolutely key. And we want to do an electronic health record. Whether it's one or whether it's multiple, that's another debate. But ultimately, the patient needs to be in control and manage their record for the data that's in. They be able to share that data. Ultimately, the hospital or in a community setting, there will be other activities that take place around an agreed and defined pathway of care. And that's
So in rolling that out,
yeah.
And that was an emergency, once in 100 years, presumable situation. So cancer, cardiac care, rheumatism will all be with us. What proposals as CIO are you bringing to Tim and to the other people, to the government, as learnings from the pandemic and a new way of doing business?
So we're bringing, I go to the board actually on the HSE on Friday, okay, around a strategic discussion around e-health and around how we maximise our e-health and how we put a strategy going forward, okay, that aligns with the real paymasters and deeper, okay, and aligns with the Department of Health. And that's really important for us. And that really is around, as I said before, putting the patient at the centre, shared care record, and having either whether it's one or multiple sets of EHRs. And what's really important for us and for all of the sort of vendors in the room is that we end up with an end-to-end process. Lots of people come to me and come to the HSE and say, I've got a piece of technology that works. And it does, and it's brilliant. But how does it integrate? How does it, across the whole of the domain that we have, how do we then maximize that data to get value from it? Right? Not just in the specific area that's in, but the totality of the organization. So it's an end-to-end journey with the patient at the center.
Okay. Miguel, if you want to, go to the outsider in the room, there's a whole culture in Ireland of different things. This is the way we do things around here. What do you make of our performance in this whole digital transformation? Are we laggards or leaders?
I would say probably somewhere in between. But from what I would like to go back to what Fran was saying and actually mentioning that we're very proud. I think it was a great example of collaboration in very little time. The setting up of all this process of tracking and tracing, the vaccination management and so on, was a very good example of what should happen more often, right? Hopefully we won't need more pandemics to provoke that kind of collaboration. But I have to say that I'm very proud that the system actually that sits behind the individual health identifier in Ireland, and that was a key in making sure that we identify the right person and we attribute the right data to the right person, is actually an Oracle Health solution, right? It's called the Oracle Healthcare Master Person Index, a bit of a mouthful. We definitely need to work on branding, but it does work. It does what is needed. So it was amazing how quickly the solution was deployed by the HSE. There was very little involvement, also our other aspects came into place, like the appropriate legal framework, emergency framework to allow for that index to be created, to allow for the vaccination process, to allow for data, for example, to flow from the Department of Motor Vehicles and so on, so that you could, for example, identify people via the driver's license. So it was very good example and a demonstration that things can happen when you put your mind to it.
One of the things that I picked up from Tim Hines was that these people in the room here may be in competition with each other. You were mentioning to me that Oracle Health can actually facilitate what looks like competitors in terms of SMEs. Just explain that to me.
No, I mentioned that to you because I was listening this morning about the difficulty perhaps about scaling, about going global, for example, in the startups, medical devices companies, getting out of the small market, which
the startup,
the startup scene, right? Getting out of the small market, which is Ireland, and you need to think bigger from the start. So we see startups, for example, for medical devices or for applications, for apps that come to us. They heard that we give them a few cloud credits, like AWS does and others do. But sometimes they're missing more ambition. I would say to those entities, do come to us with more ambition. We have, for example, an Oracle for Startups program. It's, of course, you get you get the cloud credits, but you also get mentors. You get access to our PR machine. You get access to our event, access to our.
But will you end up owning them?
Sorry?
Will you end up owning them?
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we are known for making quite a lot of acquisitions. We're now going through our biggest acquisition till date, right? Where Oracle is in the process of acquiring Cerner, which I think is well known to everyone. So we're putting $28 billion of our money where our mouth is, so to become a true healthcare IT vendor. And yes, yeah, that may happen. It may happen that we take a position or we outright buy some of those companies, could be. But the important thing is that this machine, this innovation machine, can leverage much more of our structure. The Oracle for Startups program, for example, we have a healthcare innovation group, which is tightly coupled with a rapid development group. They're always looking for the next interesting project, the next big thing. It's a set of people, very particular people, geneticists, biostatisticians, registered nurses, that looking for different ways to do things, different ways to innovate, and we have also industry-specific solutions and the specialists that go with them, right? So, for example, for medical device companies, we are market leaders in solutions for clinical trial management, right? Okay. All the process of actually getting drugs and or medical devices or medicinal products approved. I mean, if you're a startup, you don't really know how that thing works. You need help from someone that actually can.
Okay, and you have a massive checkbook of 28 billion. I got that.
Well, yeah.
Okay, Gary, you're most welcome. Now, fascinating, passionate guy. Tell us a little bit about your own story and diagnosis. Tell us a lot about technology for you and remote Zoom and how this transformed. And tell us about set dancing.
Okay, but can I just start by saying I am so grateful to everybody in this room because you're all part of a whole movement that is making my life better. It's making so many people's lives better, and it's changing the landscape for so many people. And people are thinking about things now that they wouldn't normally have thought about because of time and all that kind of stuff. So thank you guys. I'm really grateful, but we have to up it by 10x to make it happen, right? My own story, as Ivan mentioned earlier, I was 44 when I was sitting in my ex-consultant's surgery, excuse me, and he said to me, sat down in front of me, twisted my arms like that, pulled them in and out, and said, oh yeah, there's no doubt you've got Parkinson's disease, but don't worry, it won't kill you. And I said, what? He said, yeah, Parkinson's disease, that's what it is. And then he got up and he walked over to his desk and started typing something in his laptop. And I said, hang on a minute, I'm 44, I'm not 74. And he said, that's nothing. I had a girl here yesterday, she's 29, she has it as well. So, I mean, I was blown away. Robert Plant isn't even 74 yet, and I was thinking, that's pretty old, but I was a long way off that. So I went home to my wife, somehow, I got home, we sat down, and I said to her, I've got Parkinson's disease. I mean, what the F, And we just spent the rest of the day crying our eyes out and going, what are we going to do? Because at that moment I thought, my career is gone, and number two, I'll never move out of this house, because how would I get another job? And how would I get another mortgage? These are the things that start entering into your head. I mean, you ask any of my buddies across lots of things that we've done together, everybody has a similar story, and everybody thinks about something, that people would say, what are you worried about that for? The worries are real. The stresses are very real. And it's a horrible, horrible diagnosis. It gets into every single part of your life. I don't look sick now. I've just taken some medication. I'm on medication for the rest of my life. That's the way it is. I'm fine with that. That keeps me going. But that's part and parcel of life with Parkinson's. Fast forward about 5 years, because in that 5 years I just stuck my head in the sand and I just got on with everything. I took those flipping pills that are in those blister packs that are a nightmare to open. I mean, I have fine motor problems when I'm stressed. And my know-all ex-consultant gives me a diagnosis or a prescription for the tiniest pills in the worst blister packs in history, you know. What's going on there, guys? It's kind of funny, really, now when I think back on it, because we managed to get that all changed. But for 5 years, I did nothing, and then things started to go horribly wrong. I couldn't walk straight. My arm was hanging limp. My leg I was dragging. I was a perfect extra for a zombie movie, no problem. I could do that, but I couldn't do much else. And I had a decision to make because my consultant, then consultant and now consultant, Tim Lynch, said to me, "You're suffering from stress." I said, "Who isn't?" He said, "Well, in your case, stress is going to eat your dopamine, whatever you have left to it, and that's not good. So you need to leave work. You need to change your life entirely." And that's what I did. Fortunately, in work, we had a long-term illness scheme that kind of got me out there on half or two-thirds my salary. And I started to exercise like 20x. I was always running a bit. Running was always easier than walking for some reason. That's Parkinson's for you. It does that to you. It really wrecks your head in every way it can. And then, so I started running more. I got in touch with Ciara Clancy, who started Beats Medical, which is a really clever app on your phone, which sends a metronome beat based on your ability to move, and really helps you to kind of get that rhythm back into your stride. It's an unbelievable app. I think Ciara is doing outstanding work in kind of getting it out there. That's only one aspect of it.
And you mentioned to me during COVID how for all your members this interconnection and sessions you had for set dancing was stopped. And just tell us about the remote thing and how it changed.
What we did was moving on from kind of the apps and all that kind of stuff with the practical kind of solutions. Irish set dancing, believe it or not, folks, is a recognised therapy for Parkinson's disease because the beat in Irish music, 8 bars per beat, is what your brain kind of can tune into, and people can actually set dance better than they can walk. It's unbelievable. And we had groups where we're doing set dancing together for years, meeting every Wednesday. They're actually meeting right now, and we'd be, you know, having the crack and doing a bit of Irish dancing, and it was great fun. When COVID hit in, that all stopped, and let's face it, a lot of the people that I was dancing with would have been about Robert Plant's age and older, you know, maybe as old as Bill Wyman. It's incredibly old, but anyway, I'm giving away my age here by knowing these people. I don't know them. But anyway, we said, well, that's the end of that. And one or two of us said, well, why can't we just do it on really new technology called Zoom, which is like 100 years old in reality, right? So we put it on Zoom. A lot of the people who are in this 70-plus category said, we don't know anything about computers, so that doesn't mean anything to us. And I said to the guys, we have to make this work. I mean, we know it works. They can do it as well. So we got with every one of them, and over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, most people were back up online, something they could never say about their lives before. The word online terrified them, but we brought them to the point where we could show them the benefit of it. And long story short, we now have double the number of people doing Irish set dancing because of the Zoom intervention. And it's been very simple, but really effective. And it made me think, geez, like there's so much of this flippant disease that can be tackled very easily. I mean...
And can I ask you, in your role in the digital leadership group, you know, we've heard the patient is the problem. Well, the patient is actually the purpose. Do you think patient advocates are included enough in what we're talking about now, strategic collaboration?
Incredibly, no, I don't, because that's the whole problem. When you meet one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's. When you meet one person with MS, you've met one person with MS. There is so much valuable, critical information walking out the door of every consultant's rooms across the country because he or she is not listening to what the person's coming in to say. The person very often is intimidated by the environment they're going into in the first place. Is probably exhausted because they've travelled from Wexford to get to Dublin and they've gone through the same traffic that Tim Hines went through, and you know, in a nightmare they got to Tim Lynch's rooms in Eccles Street, which are all stairs and kind of attics and stuff like that. And we get 20 minutes a year. I haven't had a consultation in a year and a half because of the waiting lists and stuff like that, but I know what I'm going to say to my consultant the next time, and we try and meet as a group when we do our set dancing and do all that kind of stuff. We have the kind of virtual cup of tea at the end and talk about, this is what we're going to do. We're going to each kind of list of questions for all our consultants and engage with them. And that's the data and information that is not being captured enough, I believe, by the health service and consultants alike.
Okay. Miriam, you've been very patient there. You're the new CIO in James's Hospital, and you've set up structured health corridors. What are they?
Well, I can't take credit for that because that was done by Smart D8, which is part of Dublin City.
Okay.
But it is a collaboration between all of the players in the area, such as the HSE, St. Pat's Hospital, Guinness Enterprise Centre, the Digital Hub, and St. James's Hospital are part of that. And it's an opportunity to build on the type of work like the Living Labs, to look at people in the community, to look at how you can improve their health outcomes and institute kind of preventative health. There's a project going on at the moment in terms of heart health and looking at cardiovascular disease with Novartis, with the community groups, and with St. James's Hospital in a type of social prescribing to look at preventative health and to try and reduce unplanned hospitalizations. The reason that unplanned hospitalizations are a problem is because when a patient comes into hospital unplanned, they take a bed that then is part of that planned, and that's what is affecting the waiting list. So we need to go back at where the root of the problem is, and it's around the management of chronic diseases. And I think that's a real opportunity for us to look at in terms of collaborating between private and public sector. And I think there's a lot of that work going on. Part of what we can improve on is when we have the success with the work that the HSE have done with both the immunisation record and with the Living Labs that Martin Curley is working on, is making the decisions early to look at not when we get to the end and go, now what? But we should be going back to the beginning when we're planning the pilot and saying, then what? So if it's a success, how are we going to implement it, and how are we going to implement it nationally so that we can capitalise on the efficiencies of implementing it nationally, but also not having the wasted time of James is writing the business case and Natalie writing the business case in Tala, and we trying to go through our own separate funding mechanisms to try and implement this. This is what's slowing things down in moving, and part of what's slowing us down is the size of the country that we have and the small pot of money that we're all trying to get access to, and it's how can we use that best as a country so that we can move on with our healthcare. And I think that's one of the things that I would like to see us doing more of, to accelerate. You're talking about accelerators. We need to look at that as an accelerant.
So you have the capacity to take a pilot project and to scale it?
Absolutely.
Could you give us an example of what might emerge?
So one of the things we have is the first public acute electronic health record. I was thinking a little bit about this, and it's part of how do you bring that to another hospital. And it's like when myself and my husband are cooking in the evening, and if one of us is cooking and the other one's kind of looking over the shoulder going, oh, I wouldn't put that there, or I always turn that down, or I find that's better if you cook it in the oven.
But that's just marriage, isn't it?
That's
that's not
marriage.
the HSE's
but
fault.
It is, but it's all about collaboration, and it's a little bit like we're all working with the same set of ingredients and we're all using the same tools. So it's the outcomes that we need to focus on. And so part of that is the outcome is an electronic record that's based on evidence-based medicine. So it's not that we're all delivering a separate type of medicine, we're all delivering evidence-based medicine. So it's getting there in a way that is more efficient. And it's, Tala have developed a record, we've developed a record, the MART are going to develop a record, Children's Health are going to deliver a record. How do we work together with the SMEs and the larger tech groups to collaborate and to do that?
And is there an open door policy in James's if Christian has, the EI have clients with potential
Absolutely.
new inpatient technologies? Is there an open door?
There is an open door. We work with HIHI with some of the startups. They have an office in James's. We work with Martin Curley, we work with the HSE and with Fran's office in terms of how we implement technology. So yeah, absolutely, and we're more than willing to try, and we've lots of ideas as well. So it's looking at the staff and their ideas, it's looking at the unmet need for patients and trying to take those ideas and then make business out of it and obviously lead to a commercialisation. And I suppose that's where Enterprise Ireland comes in. It's how do you bring those products to market.
And it's all in a clinical setting. That's
Absolutely.
the point of difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise, all the questions are for Fran. So let the firing squad begin. The system, Fran, desperately needs a unique health identifier for patients. How high up in the priority list is this, and when will it be delivered? And I'd ask you maybe to give rapid fire answers rather than, we'll play ping pong rather than golf, okay?
Okay, yeah. So the IHI is available and ready, okay? It is being deployed out to patient administration systems this year, and that will cascade it through the rest of the other systems, okay? So the IHI will be available through anybody who has an integration to the patient administration systems there'll be a number of hospitals done this year and the balance early next year. It's fully available in the pandemic program.
Okay. With reference to the cyber attack, we reference the cyber attack frequently, yet a big part of the cause of this was the HSE leaving the door wide open by running out-of-date, unsupported tech, despite being warned of this risk for years. Can we be confident that the HSE IT capability is fit to lead in our digital future?
So there's lots of myths around the cybersecurity attack, okay? But one of them, which is there, is it was around unsupported old technology. Wasn't the root cause, and anybody who actually would read the report and spend the time looking at it that we did publish would actually see and understand that, okay? From our perspective, it was a process, people and process failure, right? Rather than a technology failure.
And did you run out-of-date technology, or do you run out?
Absolutely, as does every health sector in the world and every business.
I suppose the pace of change is so fast.
So if you look at where we run, there's about 2,500 systems, and every one of those has got layered technology, and every one of those has upgrades and changes that go on. And if you look as an example, okay, we are upgrading one of our core solutions, which is NIMS, which is the medical management system, okay, one of the largest in the world. Okay, now that costs a lot of money to upgrade that, to keep it secure, to keep it safer. Okay, but it doesn't move the needle hugely. But it's money that has to be spent, and we have to prioritise right across all the solutions.
You may have answered this already. Where are we at with the electronic health record programme?
So we have a number of electronic health record programs, which is maybe not the way to do it. Okay, we know that. So there's one that we're starting at CHI. We have delivered electronic health records in 4 of our maternity hospitals, which are fully paperless. Right? So if you go into them, which is Cork, Rotunda, National Maternity Hospital, okay, and in Kerry. Right? And what we want to do now is create an agreed, funded, which is the really important word there, national program. And whether it's one EHR or multiple EHRs, that debate's open. I prefer one, but I do understand the challenges around that.
Okay, for Fran, rolling out FIREE across all hospitals has been great to have a single common system across all. Obviously, cost savings, better service, as bigger customer than individual hospital. Are there any plans to do this with other systems that could be managed by a central team?
So yes, we have a team called HOI, which is Access to Information, okay, and they manage a lot of the integration that cuts across the organisation, okay, and I mean they are adopting FHIR as their primary way of integration across solutions and systems.
How do you deal with resistance to change in the HSE?
A gun. Look, let's be honest. Everybody wants everything now. Okay, and a system as large and complex as a health system, and I don't see just HSE, okay, everything can't all happen at the same time. Resistance, to be very fair to most people in the organisation, there is not huge resistance to change. People want change. Most clinicians, most people who are working in the system want the system to improve and to be better. It's a matter of how we manage that across all the priorities, which is the biggest challenge.
Miguel, when can we see the likes of the German DIGA initiative in place in Ireland to ensure digital therapies will be part of the solutions that clinicians can prescribe?
Ooh, I'm not sure if I can answer that. That's, I would say, a policy question, right? I think the pandemic opened this, or allowed people to see that digital therapies and everything that has to do with digital health is an alternative or is a complement to the traditional healthcare. So I can only imagine that those therapies, those evolutions, I would say, those novelties will also come to Ireland at some point in time. But if I understood the question correctly, this would be more of a policy question that it wouldn't be.
Okay. Miriam, you mentioned social prescribing. Are you using a technology to measure the outcomes of social prescribing?
Yes, we're just looking at preliminary data now around, number of hospital admissions and people feeling empowered to manage their own health. So they're the types of outcomes in terms of giving people ownership to manage their own health. So yes, we are.
Okay. Final question I want to ask each of you. For you, and you all have different perspectives, when we talk about strategic collaboration, that usually means someone else should do something rather than me. But I'll start with you, Gary. How can we best inculcate a culture of patient advocacy? You set out your very specific needs. How can we make a system change so that the system responds to that in the context of strategic collaboration?
Education and awareness is critical, and we need people to understand that just because they have a particular condition doesn't necessarily shut down their life. We need patients to get with their caregivers, their physicians, their consultants, and have the conversation and be listened to, that the patients are listened to, so that people can understand what they're going through and they can share this information. I mean, I didn't know that Irish set dancing was good for Parkinson's disease until somebody told me and showed me what the story was. But we don't even know how many people in the country live with Parkinson's disease. And we don't have a register for them. And this is only one neurological condition. We have a situation where Parkinson's happens to be the fastest growing neurological condition on the planet, and people are ending up going.
And in this day and age, does Dr. Google not do all that?
No.
Do they not?
Because people don't know what they're in about. I mean, you can go into Google and you get a million things there, but as the population of typical Parkinson's person is in the older category, that's a group that haven't used technology in the way that we all use it. We use it in a second. They don't really know about that until their grandchildren or son or daughter comes in and says, well, why can't we do this? I mean, if we could put a device in the hands of every person who has a neurological condition, particularly like Parkinson's, across the country, they would have connectivity, they would have the ability to press a button and see whoever they're talking to, meet with somebody, which is really important for cognitive development when you're at that stage.
Okay.
So that's so important. Put a device in everybody's hand.
Strategic collaboration in Ireland. Who needs to do what? Each of you. Miguel?
Do you want to start, or do you want me?
Yeah. I'm going to work down here
fine.
and work through because this is the final wrap up. Yeah.
Okay. Fred, you want?
Go, Miguel. Yeah.
Well, again, I'm from a healthcare IT vendor, right? And I think the name implies vendor. We will try to sell you something. That's for sure. But we definitely want to try and sell the right thing. We want to do the right thing. I think the strategic here in the collaboration is also important. So, and I know that procurement, public tender, and public procurement processes have a lot of limitations, but I think sometimes if you're striving for more collaboration, sometimes they need to be less prescriptive, right? So, leave the door more open for suggestions of different ways to go about things that sometimes could not be the ones that were the original idea. I give perhaps very quickly an example. In the US, did quite a few things wrong in everything that had to do with COVID, but I think this really worked well. So the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which is a public health entity there, came to us because we work a lot in the pharmacovigilance space, and they wanted to set up a database of adverse events for the newly developed vaccines. But you start discussing and you realize very quickly that the traditional process of the patient reporting to the pharmacist or to the doctor the adverse event, and then this goes to the pharma company that developed the vaccine, that then creates a report that goes to the FDA, here would be the PHRA, and so on. This would take simply too much time. So yeah, the idea was simply, well, wait a minute, we let the citizens report the adverse events themselves directly. A simple app, just go to a website with a smartphone and you just report your adverse events. And this is a system that has worked marvelously, collected millions of entries, came to fantastic conclusions that would not be otherwise possible. For example, pregnant women were not included in clinical trials. They are a very fragile cohort. They were, of course, not recruited for the first vaccine trials. And but many pregnant women actually decided, they took the vaccines. Some did it explicitly. They thought, okay, even if there is no body of recommendation about what to do, I still feel this is the best thing to do, and they did it. Others did it inadvertently, right? They had a jab, and then 1 or 2 weeks later, they found out, oh, wait a minute, I was actually pregnant at that time. But the data accumulated, millions and millions of entries, actually allowed the CDC to come to the conclusion, actually, there's no difference between a pregnant woman and any other woman, and we can actually update the recommendations and say, yeah, you can do it. So I think this is a good example of collaboration.
Okay, briefly, Fran and Miriam.
So we start, we are all here for patients. So there's the number one piece that's really important, okay? And then there are a lot of other stakeholders, okay, right across the whole of the breadth. So if you look, there's academia, okay, who have a huge role to play in this. There are the vendors themselves, huge role to play in this, okay? There are all the clinical teams, huge role to play in this, okay? And there's the ICT community, okay? And there's government. And it's bringing all those people together, okay, is the only way to deliver this. Otherwise, you get parts of things done.
Miriam?
I think it's building on what Fran is saying. It's taking a challenge and then looking at that as a group. One of the things about the pandemic was we had an emergency. We all needed to act fast to save lives. It's the same here now with the waiting lists and other challenges and unmet needs. It's bring everyone together, start to look at how we can do it collaboratively, and I think we can do it better together.
Okay, I'm going to give you the last word. My thanks to Miriam Roach, Fran Thompson, Miguel Coelho, and Gary Boyle. Please show your appreciation. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going